The One-Armed Journals, Chapter 2, False Life. It's funny, the things you remember and the things you don't. Certain skills and abilities that should come as second nature, like breathing, walking, or sleeping, are hardwired into us that no matter what befalls us, we will never lose those abilities. Then there's the skills you've been taught, like reading, writing, or riding a horse. All it can take is one bad day and zip, gone. Like the fingerprints on a frozen handrail, they are forgotten, discarded away from your memory. As I said, it's funny. I could drag myself off of that beach, reset my dislocated arm, bind my wound to stop myself from bleeding out. But ask me who I am and where I am from. Nothing. No matter how hard I try to recollect, nothing. A letter, a sound, nothing. I am no one. The creeping light of Pyra, the morning sun phase, shined through my sand-clogged eyelids. I could feel her warmth lightly tingling my skin. Had I been out all night? Or was this the final resting place beyond the veil? I would have almost believed it to be, if not for the loud braying of an ass and the heavy smell of wet hay and manure. Its earthly stench of urine and waste flamed my nostrils. Now would have been the exact moment where I wished the hard-wired ability of smell was also forgotten. By the gods, what was that animal fed? Rotten, skaven remains dragged through a sewer of filth left to stew on a bed of cabbage, drying out in the midday Pyranth sun. The gentle rocking of an uneven road slowly brought me back to consciousness, looking up to what was once a scene of grey and storms and cloud had become a clear crystal blue sky, the odd dancing flecks of cloud still spiraling, the glistening rays of Pyra illuminating my body, spotlighting me against the bundling sacks of what I could only assume was produce, carrots and turnips, a few sacks of grain and barley, barrels pressed up against the edges of the cart I had also been loaded into. Hearing the sloshing in the barrels move in unison with the sloshing in my head, I pressed my hands down to the cart, for a brief moment forgetting I had only one hand to use, tumbling, collapsing against the still damp wood, my face colliding against the splinters of rotten wood. "Oh, you're finally awake," a vaguely familiar voice called. It was soft and had this southern drawl. It had this youthful edge, but also elements of this wise old man. I rolled myself over back onto my back, laying my head back on the uneven sacks. "There's a water skin back there. You might want to help yourself to a drop or two." I found the skin resting against my leg. It took nearly every ounce of my remaining strength to bring it to my lips. The relief of each drop of water as soon as it came into contact with my lips and washed the sand from my throat, soothing the coarseness of my damaged throat. I can feel the stinging of the sensitive torn skin as the water pushes through, the blood mixing and causing me to almost choke. I pour some of the water over my face to hydrate my eyes, and for the first time I can see clearly. The noticeable silhouette of my saviour and driver shielded my eyes for the most part, the creeping rays of light illuminating his head like some angelic deity to escort me. Truly not how I imagined the ferryman to look, but I suppose no one has been able to meet him and write about him afterwards. His figure looks short and stocky, round-headed and short-necked, quite well-built shoulders and arms filling a white shirt that has yellowed in tone over time. Leather straps bind a dark brown apron to his chest. His tight bun of fiery orange hair held up high with braided lengths of hair creeping from under the mess. He turned his head to face me. A powerful accented jaw appeared, underlined by a well-kept beard of slightly darker orange hair that came to a braided point at his chin. His features somewhat youthful but also carried time and wisdom. Piercing emerald green eyes with a dark black rim to iris. Turning his head, he smiled. "Glad to see you're up and about." That familiar southern drawl coming through. "Me and Elsie here thought we might have to make a detour to the local gravedigger, but I see now that won't be necessary." I placed my hand beside me, pushing myself up and against the edge of the cart once again, slumping hard against the wet wood. I groaned in considerable pain. The man spoke again. "Easy there, son. You've lost a lot of blood." He reached behind into a small leather pouch and pulled out what looked to be a small tinderbox and a pipe. A few hums of orange light and a few puffs of smoke. He released the reins and leant back, arms behind his head. The cart continued at a steady pace, never diverting from the path. "You mean I'm not dead?" I struggled to say. What was nothing more than a whisper like the wind pushing through an open door. "Close, but not yet, no. You have suffered some mighty devastating injuries. When I picked you up, your wound was green and leaking, like a marrow left out in the midday pyranth on Agni Day." He finished with a hearty chuckle and throated sigh. I had no idea what he was talking about, yet it was strangely familiar, the words he used. Pyranth, Agni. I only wish at the time I could remember what they meant. "Sir," I inquired, readjusting my position. Upon doing so, my foot slipped from under me and connected with something soft that let out a cry. A soft, gentle cry. Disgruntled, not in pain. A small mound of fabric bonded up next to me that when I kicked seemed to adjust and move. Something was underneath it. Possibly sleeping, or at least it was before. I hadn't noticed anyone else or any creatures on the beach with me. I reached out to the bundle, hesitant and uneasy. Placing my hand on the bundle of cloth, soft, with a little give. The noise was heard again. A light braying. "Sir," I inquired again. The man cocked his head once more. "Oh, you don't need to worry about that. That's just Elsie's new addition to the family. Yep, she was carrying that little foal around inside her and still managed to haul my ass around the continent, picking up deliveries and such. Then on our way back to Zirconia right before we found you, she popped that little angel out. So I washed her off, bundled her up, and let her rest there in the back." Perspective. Life really is an endless repeat of birth, life, and death. Thinking about this, and I was transported back to the beach and the rain. The waiting for death to greet me and the life of the dogs to pick me clean to feed the birth of their new pups. We all serve a purpose in the end. We are to consume the death of others before becoming consumed ourselves. I lifted up a portion of the bundle. There she was, this mewling foal, her eyes still glued shut, not used to the light. She was this beautiful chestnut with a white head stripe that had slowly begun to take colour. Her skinny, feeble legs still shaking from the cold breeze across her short fur. As repetitive as life is, it's unique in its beautiful creations. "Does she have a name?" I asked, slowly placing the tarp over her again. "Haven't settled on anything yet. I was going to wait till I was back home with the wife. We don't have any children of our own, so the animals become our children. We treat them like they're our own. It's the least we can do for them." I wouldn't say that. Many creatures and people in this world are in constant search for approval and love, and for most of them that day never comes. I can see the care you carry in your heart for all things, or else I'd still be on that beach, bleeding to death. Don't think the kindness you give is the least you are capable of. kindness is like snow. It beautifies everything it covers. The man turned his head. I caught the glimpses of a humble smile etching its way onto his face. He picked up the reins once more and cracked them against Elsie. A small jolt and a disgruntled noise from our steed. The cart began to pick up pace once again. "Thank you," I said. "I never truly did say thank you. I am lucky to be alive, yet because of your kindness I am here to enjoy another day." "That's quite all right, son," he responded, a little choking in his voice. "Sir, I by no means meant to upset you, just to tell you how grateful I am. Perchance, sir, might I ask you your name?" There was a brief moment of silence. Perhaps I did upset him. To point out what should be the norm, or maybe he was too humble to accept or acknowledge the compliment. Maybe his kindness has never been repaid, or worse, taken advantage of. Maybe I should just... "Francis." It surprised me to hear him acknowledge my request with no knowledge of who I was. I could have been a murderer, a thief, and he still entrusts me with his name. "Nice to meet you, Francis." I offered a smile, knowing he couldn't see it because he was turned away, focused on the road ahead. "And yourself?" His voice returned to that humbling, warm southern drawl. I paused, desperately thinking of any memory to my name. What should I say? Anything? Should I just create a persona? A fake name? No. Francis had been open and honest with me from the start. I am not going to lie to someone who has saved my life and whom I am indebted to. I don't know, Francis. I'm sorry. I can't remember anything before waking up on that beach. I felt so ashamed. I lolled my head in front of me, my hand reaching out once again to the bundle of foal. I began to slowly run my hand along the mass. I felt every inhale and exhale of her breath. It was slow, and it calmed me. I could feel life on my fingertips. And for the first time, it felt fragile, something to be preserved. I apologize to press you with further questions, as I am already owing you so much, but where am I? Felt like such a ridiculous question, but given the circumstances, one I needed answering. Are you referring to where in relation to the continent or to this plane? He spoke with mild humour behind his voice, as if the latter was a ridiculous claim, but I hadn't even considered the possibility of being on a different plane. The nature looked familiar, the air was breathable and didn't feel toxic or any more difficult to breathe than the struggle I was already suffering. I think it was a safe bet that I was still on the material plane, but the continent may have changed. To play it safe and close to the chest, a worthwhile answer. Yes, sorry. Being laid on that beach, I assumed I washed up on the shore after some terrible incident on a ship. I tried my best to lie and create a believable backstory, with my memory now becoming limited instead of what it truly was. Absent. There was silence for a moment as I glimpsed Francis's eye peering over his shoulder, dissecting if what I said was truth or not. The pause lasted no longer than a moment before he spoke again. Well, son, you're on the northwestern coast of Greystone, about 3 days' travel off of the town of Zoconia, which is where my establishment is, a small place where me and my wife hang our hats and serve the faces of folk. A selection of fine ales, meads, and meats. It isn't anything flash or high profile, but it's welcoming and home. I could hear in his voice as it trailed off when speaking about his home. Must have been away for some time. And had he had to detour to save my life? Who knows how long I've kept him from his livelihood, I slumped myself back against the cart, lulling my head. I tried not to think about that voice in my head again, or that flamed-toothed creature that plunged his blade into my chest. I echoed that voice over and over again in my head. Pursue. Pursue. Pursue someone? Was I to go after this flame-headed monstrosity? Right now I couldn't blur the line between foolishness and vengeance. This creature, monster, god, whatever he was. He had shown me no mercy, no remorse. He had torn off my arm and plunged the blade through my chest and left me for dead on that godforsaken beach. My chest. My chest. I ran my hand along my shirt. It was dirty and wet, the still lingering scent of sand and seawater. I could feel the pieces of torn and frayed fabric on my fingertips. There. The hole. Francis must have patched me up on that beach. I didn't want to look. I don't think I could stomach the visceral carnage that must have befallen me from a wound that large. But what I felt was far more horrifying. As my finger caressed my skin, I felt nothing. How? How could there be nothing? I saw in my visions the blade thrust through me. My senses recall the searing pain of that blade. My heart's fear will not forget that face, so how could there be nothing? Francis! I called out with a little bit too much urgency that it caused him to startle and pull the reins, bringing us to a slammed halt. Elsie, braying over the sudden stop, her head shifted from side to side as if scanning the area. This creature was well trained to be out here in the wilds. She knew what to look for and where to look in case of predators or bandits. The surroundings were quiet as we began to pass through a stretch of road lined with trees on either side. My outburst had startled a few birds that quickly began to fly and chirp as they fled. "What is it?" Francis spoke with urgency, standing up upon his wagon seat, drawing a small hunting knife from his side. He began to quickly scan the area. I began to feel guilty for causing a panic, but clearly this was not Francis's first time encountering something in the depths of these forests. "I'm sorry, Francis, please, don't startle. But when you found me, what was my condition like? The injuries, the wounds. Why did you patch me up?" As I spoke, I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes. This look of desperation on my face. Francis looked at me in confusion. "What are you talking about? I patched you up because you were losing a lot of blood. Your arm was severed and you had a gaping hole in your chest. The blood was pouring out of you. You left a trail line in the sand where you had dragged yourself along. Why?" He looked me over head to toe, a flurried brow of fear and slight anger. He continued to keep scouting around just in case. "Nothing. I'm sorry. Let us carry on." I slumped back into the cart, turning my body away to face the open road that we were leaving behind. It's been a few days at least. How could a wound that severe be healed completely? Another question to be added to the list. But for now, I need to rest. I will find you wherever you are, and you will answer my questions.